one is?
It's called the Avalon. This is a really good just Cuban staple. It works elsewhere too, but I mean, it was designed in Cuba, so it's probably just fished by the guides more often. I think really when you get into it, no matter what you're fishing for, whatever fly is the guide's favorite is going to be the top fly for that location because they just put it in more people's hands than not. Yeah, again, I mean, fly pattern, not to say it doesn't matter, it definitely does, but within reason, there's no reason any of this stuff won't work one destination to the next, I don't think. And the Avalon's sort of a spawning shrimp imitation. Where are we here? There we go. This is a fun one to tie. It's really cool. So there's, it's been around for ages, far from a secret these days. But if you look at most of the tutorials out there, they, I mean, they tie it one way and it works fine. But when I was down in Cuba last, we were staying at an Avalon-owned operation. Avalon is an Italian company. They manage most of the fisheries down in Cuba. And it is the same guy that designed this fly originally. And so part of our sort of gift package for the week was they gave us each 10 Avalon flies that we've ended up fishing pretty heavily that week. And what struck me was that there were, I think, 4 different variations of the fly in there, and none of them quite resembled the original fly that I had been used to seeing online everywhere. So I'm going to tie it a little bit more like one of those variations. And then, if you want to look up the other version at home, go for it. And again, it probably doesn't make much difference, but I really like the look of this one. It's got a very interesting kind of blend of colors and a couple little tweaks to it that I like. So this one's usually tied larger. What I do? This is a size 2. I would say for permit, you're looking at tying this thing between a size maybe as big as a 1/0, depending on where you end up, down to a size 4 on the small end. A couple of those variations that we saw down in Cuba were bonefish variations, what they call bonefish variations, and they were basically just tied lighter, much lighter. But yeah, for those 4s, 6s, that's sort of your average there. It's not a fly that translates very well, I wouldn't say, to a really small size like an 8. Which is rarely fished, but in some locations they do like them. That I would say better off stick with a simpler fly. It'll translate better into the smaller sizes like a gotcha or a crazy Charlie. This is definitely a larger fly. Switch out my thread here. Where'd that go? There we go. Sort of a light yellow thread here. And again, this isn't a fly that you really have to crank down at any stage, so I wouldn't say that that having extremely strong threads is vital. As far as thread colors go, I would say best to stay neutral in most cases. You see a lot of flies. There's a very famous permit fly called the merkin, the Delbron permit fly. Has a almost completely chartreuse body, and it's not uncommon. You see a lot of flies like that, or there's some with a bright orange body. Meant to be that hot spot, meant to attract fish, but it can definitely have an opposite effect to what you might be looking for in more pressured fisheries, where they've seen that a million times. You might want to go with a more toned down kind of fly. So I mean, tie both options, but in general, I'd say safer to play it a little duller and more neutral there. As I say, this is generally a much heavier fly than those others. So this one's going to be tied with a set of lead dumbbell eyes, which I've got here. This is a size 2 I have here. This is a Daiichi, and this actually isn't an amazing hook. It's a solid hook, and I would trust it. My go-tos are the X points. There's some heavier owners and things that are, if you're going to put in the time and suffering to try and hook yourself a permit, best to make sure you've got a hook that you can count on. This is a solid hook. This is more along the lines of what I like to tie on for the more serious applications here. So yeah, slightly heavier dumbbell eyes this time. This is a small size, I believe. Yep, small size. And again, I'm going to tie it just on top of the fly. Those same style wraps. Leaving just a little bit of room behind the eye. Not much. This is definitely tied at the front of the fly, but there is one material that you will have to tie in front of this, so make sure you leave yourself just a bit of room. The ones that we got down south, I'm pretty sure are actually tied with mono thread, which if you haven't worked with it before is a strand of mono quite literally wrapped around the spool, and sort of like 2-4 pound diameter. It's just a pain in the ass to work with, so I can't be bothered these days, or any days actually for that matter. I never got into it. But if you want to do it, go for it. A little bit of super glue on there just to lock those in place. You'll notice that on all these flies, I'm tying these in with the weight on the top side, so it's going to invert the hook. That's partially so I don't snag bottom, which is not a huge issue. If you're over deeper water, but in skinnier water it can be. This is more just to play into the design of these fish's mouths, which are usually not as much with permit, but definitely with bonefish, downward facing. And if you have a point on the bottom of your fly, it's got nothing to dig into. So having that upward point gives you some purchase there, or a chance at hooking into it at least. For the back end here, I'm going to tie in a couple different things. First off, on the top side, I'm going to tie in a set of rubber legs, and I've seen a whole bunch of different colors used. I came across a really cool color actually just today. Where'd it go? I wanted to play around with. There we are. Which is sort of a light olive. A very fine size. I find the smaller sizes just look better and more proportional to me for these antennae. So same thing, just pull off the side here, full length of one. Just tie it in so at the halfway mark. I'm not going with one on either side in this case. I'm going with both of them straight over the top, or what will become the bottom. And so I'm not going to tie one on one side and then flip it over. I'm just going to tie them both facing back like so. On top of that, I'm going to tie in, I guess, whether you want to call these antennae or legs or whatever, these are really, I guess, what we would refer to the antennae, which is a strand of black crystal flash, which actually gives you a really neat look for those on the back. Same thing, I'll just fold it in half around my thread.
How many fibers do you have?
This is just one. Yeah. Back here.
Disappears on the screen.
You can kind of catch a glimpse of it there, but it is pretty fine, and I don't again think it's really integral to this fly, but it adds a nice touch. On top of that, I've got, this is just orange glow bug yarn. You can use orange EP fibers. Really any orange material would work. A little bit of dubbing could work for you here. Yeah, just pull off small tuft. Going to, at this point actually, invert the hook. I want this to lay on top of these fibers, so I'll double that around the thread here, tie it down right on top. I'm going to cut this just past the bend of the hook, so that's your spawning shrimp element. That's the leg sack back there. Whatever they take it as, who knows. Then on the back here, before we go any further, I'm going to do something. This is that little different step here. I'm going to take a piece of mono, or in this case I just had some fluorocarbon lying around, so relatively heavy, 15-20 pound monofilament line. I'm going to take a length of that, 6 inches long or so, just to make it easy to work with. And I'll tie it in, because mono is pretty slippery stuff, pretty well the full length of the shank here, but right on top, again, what will become the bottom. I'll just let hang off the back here. Okay, do that, flip this guy over again. So now we're working on, again, what will become the top of the fly. Over the sides, we're going to take a little bit of this. This is a flat braid, similar to diamond braid if you've worked with that before. The flat braid is nice just because it lays down, as the name would imply, with less bulk overall. You still get the color and the effect of the stuff, but it doesn't take up as much room there. So I'll take, it's just in pearl. No matter what color you tie this in, I'd use pearl. Take a length, again, 4 or 5 inches long, 5 inches. Tie it over, I should do this slightly differently, I suppose, if I want to do it properly. That would be the cheap way to do it, but take 2 strands here, really, and tie them in on each side, but the full length of the shank, and this is just to, again, keep that even base. Tying them around the sides and maybe slightly quartering upwards toward the top, but more toward the side. Get those locked in there. And then this is where it differs just a little bit. For the body itself, I've got some very pale yellow chenille here. The traditional one that I've seen, some of them do use chenille, usually in a tan, not this color. Others will use a little bit of tan marabou or another color marabou, and they'll tie that marabou in first as a slight little bit of a tail to veil this, but then also they'll take the plume and they'll wrap it forward to create the body, which I suppose you could do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, as I say, this is that little bit of a tweaked version that we saw down south. So just a fine rayon chenille. I like rayon when I can get away with it for chenille better than, say, ultra chenille, which is the stuff that you use for San Juan worms, because when it gets wet, it gets a little darker, it gets a little bit of translucency to it, it looks softer, versus the ultra chenille, which is almost too clean in my mind. So I definitely prefer working with this stuff. I might take this back slightly, and there we go. Bring my thread up to the eyes here. Just go over the body quickly with this. Right up against the eyes. Get that close. And now that flat braid that we tied in, what we're going to do is we're going to pull it over the sides here. Tight, and we want to tie it in now. We tied it on the sides. We're going to tie it in more toward the top of the shank. So it's sort of angled across the back. Like so. Cut off the ends. Now we're going to tie in the claws. The claws of this fly are rabbit. And yeah, this is the other little change, I guess, in terms of color. I'd never seen one, again, until we were down there, but this is a cream color, so a very, very pale color. But yeah, definitely the tan will work. And again, this is to do with the fishery that you're in. This may not be the winner at every fishery that you end up with, and to a certain extent the bottom. Although this is usually a flight you're going to fish over slightly deeper water, so I'm not as worried about bottom color. It's going to be mid-water column, so it has nothing but the water itself to contrast against. I'm going to take this rabbit and I'm going to measure it so that from the tie-in point, this extends back just. Basically, the hide will overlap that egg sac, but the fur itself might go a little further. That's the length that I'm looking for. I'll just come in between the hair, trim that, and then just get one more at the same length. You can measure it against the other clump here if you want to just keep them even. We're going to tie one on either side here behind the eyes. So I'm really just with firm thread wraps pinching that so it squeezes into that gap behind the eyes here. I think the eyes do actually protect this material from getting torn off a little bit better. I mean, it's being tied in pretty securely, but having a material immediately in front of your tie-off point, like a solid material like that, like these eyes, definitely doesn't hurt. Get 3 or 4, a couple more wraps tight over top of those, and that's the profile you're looking for. If anything, maybe slightly further toward the top. That's pretty good. There we go. Now we're going to take our thread back up to the eye here, and if you remember that mono that we started with here, this is sort of the key trait of an Avalon. Interestingly, this is one of the things that the bonefish ones, those lighter versions, skipped because it does add weight, but for any other version for deeper water, and not necessarily just because it's for bonefish or permit, but just for deeper water options, I'd usually tie this in. So we're going to take that mono. I've got some very small beads here. These are 3/32 of an inch beads, usually in black or silver is the go-to color. Black if you want to be a little more subtle. I'm going to take about 4 or 5 of them and just thread them onto that line. This is 1, 2, oops, 3. And they don't add much weight, but what they do, because you're moving them so far from the center of gravity on this fly, they do help keel the fly a little better. And there's some argument, I guess, of whether or not it actually works, but the intent is to act as almost a little bit of a rattle as well, because they're free sliding on the mono. They'll sort of clack together as you're stripping it. As long as those fish aren't too skittish, sound theoretically should help you attract them and call them in. So you should be able to see it there. It's just I've got these things stacked. I'm going to then bring my mono forward. So I've got a little bit of an arch here that maybe raises up, I don't know, it's the 1/4 of an inch or so, 3/8 of an inch from the body. And to make things easier, I like to just shove that mono down through the eye so I can control that, hold it where I want it. About there's good. Get a thread wrap on top of there, and even from here I can adjust, make sure that looks all right. Shorten up if I need to. Flip it over and I'll just pull the mono back once more. So I'm tying it back down on itself. Make sure it's extra secure. And I'll cut that mono short. A few more thread wraps to build up that head and then whip finish. It's a weird looking fly, but it definitely catches its fair share of fish. And yeah, the adjustments you can make, obviously, drop the lead dumbbell eye, switch out for bead chain, drop the keel if you want, downsize, upsize, whatever. Play around with the colors. This is a pretty neutrally colored one. This isn't too flashy. You can tie these with, say, like a bright orange set of legs for a hot spot as well to add to that effect. Yeah, I've seen it tied with yellow legs, with all sorts of things. For the length of the tail and the legs here, I'm actually going to leave that crystal flash. It should be quite long. For the legs, I'm only going to cut them about, I'd say about half the length of that set of antennae though. That there's good. I'll take a look at my rabbit here as well and just make sure that's even. You can see the side's definitely longer. So I'll just trim that down ever so slightly to bring it in line with the other claw. That's a little better. Even bring it down further. A little better. Cool. That's the Avalon.